What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor Season 40, Episode 2 of Winners at War, Take 3. So my name is Rachel.
And I'm Alyssa, and earlier today we had some technical difficulties where Rachel's camera was not wanting to show her face in any sort of clarity. So we're hoping that doesn't happen in this stream because we want to get to talk about this and get out all of our thoughts because we've done the first like 5 minutes of this stream 2 times already, and I feel like I'm repeating myself even though you guys haven't heard what I had to say. So
Yeah, no, literally, it was like I was transported back 20, 30 years in the terms of internet technology, and everything was blurry, and everyone was using all of the college bandwidth, it seemed. So the internet was not being cooperative earlier. And so now we're back at the nighttime trying to film this again. And so let's pray and hope that this works out well now.
yeah, and if it doesn't, we'll cry. Anyways, so this episode was a fine episode, and Rachel and I were talking about how it's kind of good when you have just a fine episode in the beginning of these um returnee seasons because having a great episode normally means that one of your favorite people went home. So yeah.
Yeah, Alyssa and I both thought that this episode, it was interesting, it was good, but it wasn't like a, oh, poop in my pants, holy crap, this is crazy kind of episode. Partly in because, we didn't care necessarily either way in like who was going to go home. And so with Danny being the one voted out, it's sort of like, okay, cool. She's gone and now we can continue moving on. If Tyson or someone got voted out, I would think like, oh no, I hate this episode. Like, this sucks, but it would make the episode more interesting when one of your like fan favorite people go home. So this was a fine episode, but not something, even on the rewatch, I was like, oh, this is slow.
Yeah, I feel like definitely there were some conversations that on the rewatch I just skipped because I was like, the only thing that came out of this was a lot of cringe. So I feel like there was a lot of talking and not a lot of doing in a lot of this episode, which was eh. And then what I thought would be the most interesting part of the episode, Rob like avenging Amber or whatever, actually didn't end up being that interesting because there was nothing really he could do because they haven't swapped and he hasn't like figured out yet who um was the one to vote out Amber.
Yeah, so the top of the episode, we see Boston Rob getting a fire token from someone on the other tribe in his bag. It was like, oh wow, a morning present. It must be Christmas kind of thing. And so he is talking with Parvati, and I'm a fan of this alliance. Like Alyssa and I have talked about in like our pre-season stuff, we think that the big dogs do need to stick together. Otherwise, like, you're going to have the target on your back if you vote out Parvati, if you're Boston Rob kind of thing. And so I feel like throughout this episode, we saw Boston Rob just like sort of out of his mental state. We definitely saw it in the immunity challenge when it was confirmed that Amber was the one voted out. But at the top of the episode, when Boston Rob and Parvati are talking, Boston Rob is like, okay, maybe it's Amber, but maybe it's Sandra. And we were like, oh, I guess that's an interesting second person to pick. I'm wondering, maybe he thought it was Tyson that got voted out, but then they cut that out of the episode. And then just him talking about Sandra got into the episode. But it would be interesting to hear that thought process behind why Sandra, especially because of, I guess he doesn't know Sandra's mad at him right now.
Yeah, and I feel like that's part of the reason they chose to keep in him talking about Sandra because it's kind of this juxtaposition of like Rob thinks he and Sandra are cool, and if Sandra got voted out, she might give him her fire token, whereas like Sandra is totally bitter and wants to get Rob out because she's upset that he never told her he was returning or whatever. And like that's so petty. Like, I love Sandra, but I just can't get behind her being so petty. Especially because it's like, she has to know that Rob, like, has to talk to Amber about these things. And it was implied that they didn't get asked to come back to Winners at War until they were already on Edge of Extinction. So it's not like Rob could make that decision without talking to Amber. So
Yeah, that's true. And I wonder how much of it is Sandra doing it for show? Like, oh, he didn't tell me, I hate them both kind of thing. Because even on the like pre-show kind of whatever that was premiered before the season aired, there was like a panel with Jeff and then Boston Rob, Parvati, Amber, Sandra, Wendell, and Sophie were all there. Sandra brought it up again, saying like, "Oh, I'm mad at him because he never told me," kind of thing. So I wonder if it's like, okay, it's going to be a storyline this season, or if Sandra just wants screen time, so you just have to say those like little things because then you know it's probably going to make the episode, and you'll get like your little bits of screen time here and there, even if you aren't going to tribal council. So yeah, I don't know. Like you're saying, I don't know how you can hold a grudge like that unless she must have taken it really personally, which is the problem.
yeah, and I think it's one of those things where Sandra has to know that like Rob is one of the only people in the game who's comparable in like threat level to her. And it's like if she starts gunning for Rob, then there's not going to be any shield left for her. So I really don't understand why right now she thinks going for Rob is a good idea, except for that she's just really angry. So
Yeah, so that's interesting. That will be something we'll definitely have to keep an eye out on, especially once the tribe swap or something of the sort happens. Because, like we mentioned last episode with the premiere, even if Sandra wasn't the person like guiding the vote last week to target Amber and the Poker Alliance, from what we saw from the edit, it seemed like Yul was guiding the vote. It seems that Sandra will be the person put with all the blame in the eyes of Boston Rob, even if it's not true that like Sandra was the person that was targeting Amber 100 million% kind of thing. So I think that will be interesting and, you know, good on Yul, I guess, because then it shifts the blame away from you. But that was last week. And then going into this week some more, we see Ben helping Denise find a hidden immunity idol. And so I don't know. I think we mentioned it last week as well, though, but we're definitely seeing a different side of Ben this season. And so he says that he wants to focus on his social game because that's something that he felt wasn't as good last season that he was on. And then he is helping Denise, which makes sense. I thought that is a good strategy, especially because he has the target of like being a wild card, like we heard other people explain him as a wild card, or being the like super awesome great idol hunter, especially because they're playing on the same islands that Ben did find all of those hidden immunity idols on. I think that this strategy for Ben is a good one, even if it doesn't pay out in the long term, but I think like for right now it's a good one.
yeah, I think it's good for Ben because he doesn't have the idol but if you show someone how to find idols, they're almost guaranteed to find an idol in front of you, which is what did happen with Denise. So I have a lot of thoughts about Denise getting the idol and what went on with that. So
So yeah, without Denise says without Ben, I would not have found this idol. So it seems like from her confessionals, she is more trustworthy of Ben, feels maybe indebted to Ben in a way because she is saying like, oh, Ben didn't try to convince me to give him the other half of this idol, so now I trust him more kind of thing. And so this is a split idol, which I mean, I guess it's interesting. We've seen sort of split idols in like Ko Wrong with Ty having the other half of the idol. And then we've also seen it sort of with the idol that Devins and then Chris Underwood got when they came back from Edge of Extinction. So like some person has to have the other half and then you keep the other half. And it just seems on the talk of advantages that there are literally 4 advantages in the game right now on day 6. Sure, you can say that Sandra's idol from the Edge is a timed idol. It will disappear after 3 tribal councils, but like we said last time, if the red tribe isn't going to tribal council, Sandra could have that idol in merge technically if she never goes to tribal. And so I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of advantages floating around, especially because it does seem like every single week they will be doing a scavenger hunt on Edge of Extinction.
Yeah, which is like, I kind of wish that the scavenger hunts were harder somehow, because it's like, yeah, they struggled a little bit with their scavenger hunt this week, but if they had read the clue that said water well, it would have been super easy for them to do. So I feel like they either need to make the scavenger hunts much, much harder, or they need to make the advantages less powerful, or they need to do them less often. Just because right now Jeremy has the like power or safety without power. Kim and Sophie have the 2 halves of the one idol. Denise and Adam have the 2 halves of the other idol. And then who has the last advantage?
Sandra.
Right, Sandra has the idol that expires in 3 tribal councils. And it's like, that's just a lot. And like, we know from what Sophie said this episode that she probably is not intending on ever letting Kim use her idol, but that doesn't mean that it's none idol still in play, you know? So it's just a hot holy mess. And I really don't know what they're gonna do to start keeping track of things for us, because it's like you need to know how many fire tokens people have so you know whether or not they can buy an advantage from the Edge, and you need to know what like advantages or just I guess what advantages they have. So
Yeah, that's interesting. Because they would have to have on the screen, like they've been doing in recent seasons, like this person has one idol when their name comes up in a confessional. So like technically 6 people have some form of advantage, like whether half idol or whole idol, they'll have to like signify that on the screen for us. And then I guess also they'll have to tell us like, okay, Boston Rob has 2 fire tokens, Natalie has 2 fire tokens, but Jeremy and Sandra went back down to 1 fire token. There is just a lot to keep track of. And I don't know, I feel like if you weren't a super fan, it'd be maybe not something on the top of your brain when you're watching the episode and then you're like, holy crap, I forgot that this person had that thing and that person had the other thing kind of thing. But going back to Denise, so Denise talks to Adam. Adam is not a fan of Ben knowing that they have the have idol kind of advantage. And so it's interesting because yes, it makes sense. Okay, you want to bring in another person into the alliance. Let's gain trust. Let's talk to Adam about this half immunity idol. Makes sense, okay? If you have it, it's going to expire. If you don't share it with someone, you have to share it. Makes sense to bring in someone. But it seems maybe a little bit bad for Ben because Adam is the other person with the half idol. And he said multiple times throughout this episode that he doesn't trust Ben, that Ben is a wild card. He's nervous with Ben. So I could definitely see this biting Ben in the butt in the case that, okay, Ben doesn't have an idol. You can either idol him out or just vote him out because he doesn't have an idol. And Adam and Denise both know where the idol is if the tides are turning to vote Ben out. I don't know.
Okay, but
so
this
like
is
if
better than Denise's idea to give the other half of the
Okay.
idol to Parvati. Like when she said
so
that,
with the Parvati thing, it's with the edit. I feel like because people were saying that Denise and Parvati have some kind of relationship that's just not being shown on the edit, and they're like sort of close. So I feel like Denise saying Parvati, you can't really give her too much slack about it and like be like, oh, she's such an idiot. Why would she say that? if she actually does have a relationship with Parvati that the edit isn't showing. But I agree. I don't know. Parvati would be dangerous with that information, but then also similar to Kim telling Sophie, Parvati is someone with Boss and Rob who is in the driver's seat on the tribe right now. And maybe you want that person as your ally, but it could definitely bite you in the butt.
Yeah, I feel like the thing is, when someone is in the driver's seat, you don't want to give them even more power and leverage. And I feel like that's where I'm like, why would you do that? Because it's like, even if you do have a really strong relationship with someone, if they already have more power than you do, you don't then give them even more power on top of that. Because it's like, Parvati's in the driver's seat with Boston Rob. I'm pretty sure Denise knows Parvati's in the driver's seat. Because, like, how could you not? And then being like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give her power over me specifically when she already has power over the tribe as a whole. Like, that's just asking to be hurt, I think.
I feel like also you could look at it in the way of like, okay, this person is in the driver's seat if we're doing a car analogy. If we want to do a plane analogy, that seems to be popular on recent seasons of Survivor. Like, if they're in the driver's seat and you're on the outs, okay, if you go to someone in power, maybe they won't vote you out because you trust them enough to give them that kind of information, and they think like, oh, this person's in the minority, I can use them for a vote, they can be like my little goat back in my back pocket kind of thing. And so I feel like it definitely depends on who is the person in the driver's seat, because I could definitely see either way, like the person in the driver's seat uses it against you, like, oh, haha, sucks for you, I have the other half of the idol, I'm going to vote you out kind of thing. Sort of like Sarah and Sierra Dawn Thomas with the legacy advantage. Depends on who you tell. They could go straight and vote you right out to get that advantage for themselves. But with the half idol, I think maybe the person in power would want to use you for a few votes. So then maybe you can use that idol to do a blind side or to save yourself, versus like a legacy advantage. Makes sense to vote them out so then you can get the advantage.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but it's also like, if you're not sure how complete your control over the person is with a half idol, you don't want to keep them around. Because it's like, let's say Parvati and Denise have like an okay relationship, but not the strongest relationship. And Parvati isn't 100% sure that Denise wouldn't use her idol to like blindside Parvati or blindside Rob. Like, that's when I think you get into sticky territory with telling people. So I guess what you said is true, and it's just what you tell people and then what advantage they could get by voting you out. So
Yeah, it's super interesting with the half idol because there's just so much risk reward with it, because can you trust the person you're telling enough to use the idol with you? Or you could see like the wrong Ty situation where Ty is going to not use the idol to save an alliance member. So it definitely does make it more interesting to have all of these half idols floating around. I wonder though, like, would you ever not share it with someone before the sun goes down, as the clue said, and just keep both halves of the idol and use it as like a fake idol to gain leverage with other people? Because sure, you can make a fake idol out of string and rocks and whatever and paint it, but maybe if you have this very realistic looking half idol, you can pretend it's some kind of super idol or something, and maybe that could have even more power than sharing it with someone and then having them not give you the other half of the idol back. Because even last 2 seasons ago with Edge of Extinction, after the season, Rick Devens was saying like, oh yeah, he shouldn't have given Chris the other half of the idol back kind of thing. And I feel like we're going to see more and more of that in Survivor, where no one is going to help you out ever. And so maybe a smart move in the future would be using it as a prop.
I also wonder if you can like mix and match halves of the idol. Like, if Kim and Denise get put on the same tribe, could they put their two idol halves together to make a whole idol? Or does it have to be like the halves that were originally together have to stay together?
If anyone in the chat or comments know, let us know. From what I've heard and seen, and Taryn talked about it on his Rob Has a podcast, which I really like Taryn. So, if you need any guest stars, I would love to be a part of that. But they did not know either. Reddit has not really talked about it, it seems. But it would be interesting if you could mix and match it. But it seems from the instructions, it says like one size fits all and not, you can't like hodgepodge them together.
Yeah, it seemed to me from the instructions that were read that they had to like stay with their original one, but it's also like not clear enough. Just like I feel like Sandra's idol isn't clear enough whether or not she gets it for 3 tribal councils or her 3 tribal councils. So
yeah, and so this is also going into Kim finding the idol. Kim, we're seeing a totally different side of her this season. She is on the bottom and she has to claw her way to the top. She talked a really good analogy of like when you're on the bottom and then you start to like try to make moves to get off of the bottom, that really pushes you down into the bottom even more because people see that you're trying to make moves. And so I thought that was a very interesting full circle kind of, the word in like coding, when it's an infinite loop, you just can't get out of the hole that you're in. And the way she was, the way she was trying to find her idol was so weird. She was saying, I'll just go where my mind tells me to go, wherever the wind blows, and I'll find the idol.
I mean, it worked for her, so I feel like we can't knock it. But that was an interesting strategy, I guess you could say. So I think for me, Kim's idol was also one that was split into halves, as we already alluded to. For me, it really confused me as to why Kim decided it would be a good idea to use an idol to bring someone else into an alliance who she didn't already like trust somewhat. Like her whole thing was like, I would like to work with Sophie, so I'm going to use this to bring Sophie in, rather than like, oh, I think I'm like starting to develop a good relationship with Sophie, so I'm going to use this to strengthen our relationship. Like, I feel like an idol is not like an opening move that you use on Survivor for relationships, unless you absolutely have to.
Not a first date move.
Yeah, not a first date move.
So I think we see two polar opposites here then. With Denise and Adam, it's a like, okay, this is the third date. I'm getting to know you. Let's solidify and become boyfriend, girlfriend. And then the Kim Sophie idol sharing is like, first date, come on too strong. We're getting married tomorrow. Here's my ring idol thing. Which I feel like with the Kim and Sophie idol, it's more of the Kim is on the bottom and she sees Sophie as the top. Similar to maybe if Denise saw Parvati at the top of the food chain and you want to be in the leader's good graces, which I don't know. I think Yul posted something on Twitter maybe about like his strategy from the premiere episode, which then has been deleted probably because CBS made him delete it kind of thing. But he was saying that they wanted to pull Kim in as like a minion of their alliance and then not Tyson. So with those two on the bottom, they did want to bring Kim in. So maybe it's something with that where Kim feels connected with Sophie and we're just not seeing their relationship on the island. Or maybe Yul was the only person that wanted to bring Kim in as an alliance member. But I think it is really telling that in Sophie's confessionals that she's saying, why would Kim tell me? She should have told Tyson. Sophie may not be on board as much like with Kim as we think that Kim thinks that she is, kind of thing. And then she describes Kim as a super good social player and she doesn't want to work with her. So this could be an instance where a Sarah Lucina and Sierra Dawn Thomas kind of legacy advantage thing.
Yeah, I feel so bad for Kim. Like, it just makes me sad to see her like struggling so hard. But this would be a really good, like, I think it would be interesting if this somehow makes Sophie and Kim stop being enemies and instead become like allies. I'm not sure how it could happen, but it would be fun. So
yeah, it seems like Kim does not play the bottom well. last episode when she was on the floor, and then this episode, which seemingly by the edit, this is a snafu, and this will bite Kim in the butt because Sophie does not really want to work with her. So it'll be interesting next week. I don't really see Red going to Tribal Council because they literally dominate. And the only reason Blue won last week was because of Jeremy being somehow really good at the ring toss at the end. But I don't really see them going to Tribal next week. And then probably at 16, you would do a tribe swap. So yeah, and then I guess it's interesting with these half idols, if you're tribe swapped onto different tribes, can you will it to someone else on the tribe that the other person is on so then you can still use it? Because if you split 8-8 next in 2 weeks from now and then your two halves are on different sides and then you get voted out with a half, but you could have had a whole, like, I wonder.
Yeah, it's just, there's so much to think about, and I wish that we got rules more clearly, but it's fine.
They just make it up as it goes, you know? So if someone does have a half blue, half red one, even though that's why they don't tell us the rules. So maybe they would allow it if someone's smart enough to come up with that on the island. That's why they don't tell us what the rules are with these advantages.
Yeah.
So speaking of advantages, with the Edge of Extinction, Natalie, she just really walks upon the advantage and they don't understand the clue. So I feel like my problem with this, I feel like if you had other people on the island, they would have totally noticed the first letters lined up said water well, but these two people didn't. So if they don't get the clue, I feel like you shouldn't be able to find the advantage if you don't understand the clue. It shouldn't be something that you can just walk up on and be like, ha ha ha, I bamboozled my way into finding this advantage. It should be like an actual scavenger hunt, or like you actually have to find multiple clues. You know, I don't know. It's just like if you can randomly find something, then why do you even need a clue?
I mean, people argue that about idols too now, though, about how, like, you used to need clues to be able to find hidden immunity idols, and now you don't really. I think for me, it's more like there was no strategy involved to Natalie finding that. Like, she didn't look a lot of places. It was kind of just accidental. And I feel like if you're gonna just randomly hide the things, it should be hidden in like a place you would actually have to search for it. Or it's like if Amber had gone to the water well to get water, would she have been the one to find it? And I also feel like we have someone in the chat saying that like they wish it was like on seasons where you like had multiple clues to get to the idol. Like you'd have a clue to another clue to another clue to another clue to another clue to the idol. And so it was like actually a scavenger hunt instead of just one clue takes you to the advantage or one clue takes you to the idol. Especially because it's not like they have anything better to do on Edge of Extinction. So
Yeah, so similar to season 39 with the Tommy Dean scavenger hunt, I don't know. I just think if you can randomly find it, then it's a little bit too easy to do it. But Natalie has found two advantages now on the edge, so she is killing it. And so good for her with that. I think Natalie going home first, honestly, is probably the best thing for Jeremy's game because Natalie, one, good at finding these clues, advantages, getting this stuff for on Edge of Extinction, and without Natalie there, I feel like Jeremy's threat level goes down some. So Jeremy gets offered a safety without power advantage, which personally, I don't really think is a good advantage because, okay, say next week, Jeremy and Michelle say they're on the bottom, and then Jeremy takes himself out of tribal council, so he can't get voted out. He's safe. But then they probably just switch the votes to your other minority alliance member. So then you're sort of just screwing the other person in your alliance. I'm trying to think of a way, how would you use this effectively? Because you would really only use it if you're maybe going to get voted out. And then so if you're in the majority, maybe you send yourself home because you don't want to be the person to vote out like your best friend, and that's where the votes were going, so you save grace with the jury. But I don't know. I just think taking yourself out of tribal council, then you screw over your minority alliance member, and then you don't even have a vote. And the whole purpose of the game is to have a vote to vote people out. And so if you don't have that, then I don't know. It's interesting.
Maybe it's like one of those things where you buy yourself more time. Like if you think a swap is coming or if you think the merge is coming and it's like 50-50 before you swap and you're like, okay, there's a 50% chance I'm going home. But if we swap next time, I could swap onto a better tribe. So this could be the vote that like I just need to get past this vote
Yeah.
and I don't have anything else. So this is going to be what I use to get past this vote.
Yeah. So on Australian Survivor in Champions versus Contenders 2, we saw a similar kind of advantage, but Luke had the advantage where you could send someone else on your tribe home so they don't get to vote. And I would argue that that is a better advantage. I guess I'm not really sure. I don't remember, but maybe Luke could send himself home as well, or you had the option to send someone else home so they don't get the vote. And I think that's more powerful because then maybe you could even out the numbers if it's a small tribe. With Luke sending Baden home and then Baden didn't get to vote, they pulled off a blindside in that episode. And so I don't know. I think just with more options, I guess Jeremy's safety without power advantage isn't that clear. Can he send someone else home and like get a majority, or is it just can he only send himself home? And can he, like, if he gave this advantage to someone else, they can send themselves home, but maybe you can't even give the advantage to someone else because he bought it.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely something he has to use on himself. I feel like sending someone else home is kind of just like stealing a vote or blocking a vote, though. Like, what's the point of that? You know? So, I'm really interested to see if Jeremy uses this advantage and if he. I guess there's no wrong way to use it since no matter how he uses it, he will not go home. So,
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because, like, with idols or steal a vote or block a vote or what have you, there's always a way for, like, you to end up getting screwed over.
But then even with this, I feel like it's more of a disadvantage because say it's a 7-3 after the merge, there's no more tribe swaps or anything. You send yourself home, then someone else in your bottom 3 is going to go home, then you're a 2-7.
Then you get their fire token and you buy another advantage that is somehow going to help you more.
Yeah, unless it's like, okay, this is so situational, but like you're in a bottom 3 minority, you have the save yourself, and then your 2 other people have an idol, and then you can effectively vote out someone in the majority alliance. But that just seems so situational that it's wild. But honestly, I think you could also make the argument that maybe you do want all of your friends on Edge of Extinction because it's been helping Jeremy out. He's gotten an advantage. Natalie's good at finding stuff. Maybe she'll send him something next week. And then Jeremy will just be the advantage king. So maybe you want all of your friends on the island so they can just funnel you secret prizes.
The thing is, after next week, if Natalie finds another one and sells it to Jeremy, he's not going to have any more fire tokens. So he won't be able to do anything. So I wonder if you're Natalie, do you like just give advantages to random people after Jeremy runs out of his fire tokens? Do you keep trying to sell them to Jeremy even though you know he can't buy them so that at least no one else will be able to get it? Like, what's the play there?
Because if you're Natalie, you don't know necessarily what the vibe is, like who is Jeremy working with, because you could, once Jeremy runs out and he has 0, you could try to sell it to his alliance members, but that's also risky because, you can't trust anyone with $2 million on the line. And if you were Natalie and you're friends with Jeremy, like best friends, BFFs, because of everything that you've been through, I would feel a little nervous even if you knew that Michelle and Jeremy were super tight alliance members on the island, I would still feel nervous about selling. cool advantages to Jeremy's number one. Even if like Danny goes and then Natalie can get information from Danny about tribe dynamics, I don't know. I guess, are you allowed to just sell it to someone who has 0 tokens? They're probably not going to let you do that because that's not good TV and they want people to buy the stuff, you know?
But the thing is, I think part of it too for them is knowing who has tokens or being able to guess who has tokens, because it's like, it's also advantageous to them to be able to have tokens. So if they decide for some reason that like, oh, it sucks that I'm not going to be able to get any tokens out of this, but at least my like ally still in the game will not have someone else running around with an advantage. Like, it could be a risk reward assessment thing, you know?
Yeah. And also with the guessing, maybe the people on still in the game have pooled their tokens together to like buy a tarp or food. So you really don't know who has 1 or 2 tokens to be able to purchase things. I'm intrigued to know, like, the people that do get voted out, are you allowed to tell the other people who you willed your token to? Which I wonder if that's a secret or not, and if they can tell that, because that would definitely change like who Natalie is selling her stuff to, because maybe next week you want to sell it to Denise because you know Denise has 2 and she's more willing to buy because she has more than 1, versus people who only have 1 might be more hesitant on buying, and then Natalie can't get to the 4 fire tokens needed for the advantage. And also with Jeremy, I wonder, since he knows like you can buy more things than just tarp. So at the beginning of the episode, Boston Rob made the joke about, oh, I have 2 fire tokens now. Like, I'm 1 step closer to buying a tarp. He hoo. But now Jeremy knows that things are being funneled from the edge of extinction to the island. Like, does that change your strategy? Because you know what the twist of the season is. You know that these people can sell you stuff, and that's how the fire tokens are being used as currency, versus everyone else who hasn't received an advantage seems like they're more under the assumption that you can just buy cool things like food and tarp with your tokens. So I wonder if that's going to change how Jeremy is playing the game, and I guess Sandra too, because she knows.
I think it would have to, because if people then are talking about like, oh, we should pool our tokens together, blah 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 blah,
you're like, yes, do it, waste
you
them.
should do it, but I should not. So yeah, I do wonder about that as well, just because it's like, also, at what point do you give the information away, you know? Like, if you have a really tight alliance, do you want to tell them all like, oh, don't waste your fire tokens, or do you want them to still like do that? Because it's, because theoretically your alliance having advantages is good for you, and so you want your alliance members to be able to be in a position where they can buy advantages. But at the same time, the more people who know about the advantages, like, the less good it is for each individual person. So
Yeah, I would like to hear a confessional from Jeremy or Sandra, like how this survivor economy is going to change how they're playing the game. Because yeah, sure, you can try to force other people, like, he who friends, let's buy a tarp, it's been raining, but like, you all should pool your tokens together, y'all. Like, forcing other people to waste their tokens. But then also, if Jeremy does run out, and then he has to tell people that he's close with to maybe pool their tokens, so then you can buy another advantage. But then, like you're saying, too many people know about it, then it sort of devalues the knowledge of what's been going around. And so just, it would be interesting. We mentioned it last week, but with these tokens, it stopped at 20 because that's the number of people that came into the game. Say 4 people pool their tokens and they buy a tarp. Where do those tokens go? Do they disappear, or are they like hidden, or how are those refunneled back into the system? I think that's what we need to know. We have a lot of questions that need to be answered.
yeah. So Moving on from all of these fire token head pounding things, though, other things that make us pound our head against the wall. Tony going on his like suicide mission to get papayas. Like,
That was funny.
it was funny, but also you kind of just want to be like, Tony, what are you doing? Because like everyone on his tribe thinks he's crazy. Like, people are giving confessionals about how crazy Tony is, like as they're walking with the ladder, and he does it anyway. And they're just like, does this man have no sense of self-preservation? So
It's interesting because, like, Tony's strategy coming into the season was to be chill, not look for idols, not be so outwardly crazy. And then we see, okay, him doing these weird side projects of making the ladder. Next week, it looks like he catches a shark, or Sandra catches a shark, and then Tony pulls it out of the net, is making him calm and not making him want to run around crazy. And so I feel like this is a very interesting strategy, because if you saw that on the island, you're probably like, oh, this is the biggest goofball I've ever seen. He's not that intelligent. He's a good comedic relief. Similar to like Tyson, like, oh, he's funny. He's not that dangerous. Similar, you could maybe say if Ben is putting on this facade of, I'm just an idol hunter, but I'm actually really dumb. Haha. I told Boston Rob last week that Danny was the one after him. And then this week, oh, I'm just happen to be in this group where Danny spills about the old school alliance, or even Adam at Tribal Council trying to put the torch into the hole and it's not actually a hole. Like Adam has said last season that he sort of does some small little stupid things, so then people think you're less intelligent than you are. So I wonder if Tony doing this stuff is him trying to come off as like less strategic or less intelligent. So like if you do a bunch of stupid things, it adds up and you're like, this person isn't that smart.
yeah. And I feel like it's one of those things where Tony would rather be known for being crazy, for like making a ladder and climbing up it despite it like literally falling apart as they're moving it, to then be known as being crazy for like running around looking for idols. And I'm just saying, how hilarious would it have been if there was like an idol up at the top of that tree somehow?
In a breadfruit. Like how they would hide it in colored coconuts. They're hiding them in the breadfruit. So they actually want you to go climb those trees, and you didn't sign the ladder contract just because they want you to go climb a tree to find the breadfruit idol.
Yeah. So, but anyway,
I think it's working though. Like, Tony's threat level seems to have gone down. I guess we don't know too much because Red hasn't gone to tribal and probably isn't going to tribal until a tribe swap. But with Cops Are Us 2.0, Sarah and Tony are coming back together as a pair, which, since it's 2.0, I wonder though, because, okay, 1.0, Tony voted Sarah out. 2.0, okay, we're going to be an alliance, but I won't vote you out this time. Does that make you a little bit sketched out? I wonder if this will last or not.
I think I'm not sure if Tony and Sarah's alliance would actually up their threat level as much as they seem to think it will. Because they both seem to think it would be absolutely disastrous for their game if people knew that they were still, together. But yeah, I do think it's interesting. 1.0, Tony votes out Sarah. 2.0, Sandra votes out Tony, and then Sarah votes out Sandra. 3.0, maybe they cut out the middleman. I did think it was interesting that Sarah specifically mentioned that, like, she didn't think that Tony would vote her out again because now she knows Tony. And so I'm wondering if that's foreshadowing somehow.
Then you shouldn't have gone back into the Cops Are Us alliance because they're sneaky. But I guess what she is saying about, okay, knowing your partner makes sense. Once you've worked with someone or someone, you can sort of see their cues or ticks or their giveaways. So, I mean, her logic isn't that bad. I just wonder how much maybe they have pregame alliance connections because they've played on 2 seasons together. And so that's why they're super trusting of each other, similar to like Tony and Sandra going to the Ponderosa trip together on Game Changers when they're both voted out pre-jury, so they probably bonded enough, and they realize that they do need to stick together as like major targets of the season. So I'm wondering, like, was this just a funny clip in the episode, or is this something that's going to be long-term? Because if Red did go to Tribal Council next week, I feel like you have to target the Sandra, Tony, and Sarah trio if you are the other people, or maybe vote out Tyson. Like, those are the people you probably want to take out before a tribe swap hits, because 3, they could get swapped onto the same tribe, especially if for some reason maybe you swap at 15 and it's a 5-5-5 split. If you're swapped somehow onto the tribe with 3 of them, yeah, that's a hard go, you know?
Yeah. I do think I want Red to go to Tribal Council again so that we can see more of how their dynamics shake out. But like you're saying, I don't think that's likely to happen. So.
Yeah, so because the immunity challenge, like we said, Blue just is very slow. And it could be because Boston Rob, he had a killer death glare at the beginning of this immunity challenge. It was so good. Like, he was going to literally murder someone. But maybe it's because of that. His mindset for the puzzle wasn't that good. But yeah, Blue is just lagging on these challenges compared to Red. And I wish, though, at the immunity challenge, they would have said which seasons this immunity challenge was from, because I would like to know who has played before on these challenges, because it was on Second Chance. It was also on some other seasons, maybe Philippines. I could have sworn like Denise has played this challenge before, or maybe even Brains Brawn Beauty, or I don't know. I wish they would have said it, because usually they do. And it is interesting to know who has played it before. I guess they just didn't have enough screen airtime.
It's weird, though, because you think they could have cut out like a little bit of the ladder shenanigans for like 15 seconds of Jeff saying what seasons it had been on before. But
yeah,
whatever.
and I think something cool for the future returnee seasons with these challenges, because obviously they're doing challenges that we've seen in the past, which they should have said which seasons they were on. It would have been interesting if they hid the immunity idol at the same spot where Jeremy found it in Second Chance. And then you sort of have to be thinking, oh, when was this immunity challenge played before? And oh, I wonder if there's going to be an idol on the side of the treasure chest. And then maybe you can go and find it as well. Or even like the Kelly Wentworth idol underneath the TP pole thing, or like the Troyzan idol at an immunity challenge. I feel like if you replicate those, but you don't give anyone the clue that it's going to be happening, you'd really get to see like who is thinking about the game.
That seems like so many levels of meta, though, because then it's like the people who are in those seasons have the advantage, and it's like if you're watching the seasons of Survivor as someone preparing to go on the island, I feel like you're not thinking about like, oh, they might hide an idol in the same place in the immunity challenge. I feel like
that's why they got to do it. You separate the meta versus the people who hasn't caught up on their homework of the seasons.
Yeah. But immunity challenge, Red is really far ahead. It looks like Blue might catch up on the puzzle, and then they definitely don't, and Blue loses. And
no, I was just going to say it's weird that literally this whole entire podcast so far, we haven't talked about the person that's going home in Danny. Similar to the episode, when I was rewatching, I noticed, okay, Danny wasn't really in the episode until after the immunity challenge.
Yeah, I was looking at it too, because I was like looking for her in the episode as well. Because sometimes what happens before someone gets booted is they suddenly like appear out of nowhere. Yeah. And it's like you can tell it's their boot episode, because it's like you've been irrelevant for the last 3 episodes. Where are you coming from? And then you're like, oh, they're going home. So it was strange that didn't happen for Danny.
Yeah, and sad boy hours, because during the premiere recap, we were saying how the old school alliance of Danny, Boston Rob, Parvati, and Ethan would be like a dream alliance scenario, and we thought last week that it would not work out. Haha, it did not work out. They did not last 3 days doing it. So after the immunity challenge, we see some names being thrown around. Boston Rob says, let's vote out Jeremy or Ben. With Jeremy, the other people are super afraid of a poker alliance, but Jeremy did play poker with Boston Rob. So the poker alliance isn't maybe as alive as people think, but good for Yule because it worked, and whatever you can do can incite fear in people. Great. Ben, Boston Rob says, is a wild card, and so you want to vote him out. And so I think that's interesting because multiple people have mentioned that Ben is not trustworthy, is a wild card. So I wonder if his days are numbered because you can't really get out of that hole, I don't think.
I think it will maybe point more to like Ben doing something totally wild and off the wall that like helps his game rather than it being a bad thing. I really don't understand how he got that reputation though, just because from what I remember of his season, like he was never really a wild card. He was someone playing from the bottom who used a lot of idols. And I'm wondering if maybe people are like confusing the fact that the Final Four Fire Challenge was a wild card in that season with Ben somehow being a wild card.
Yeah. It's interesting how he got that reputation because more of a like, okay, going into the merge, Ben had a loyal alliance kind of thing. Then it flopped and then he was playing from the bottom, which maybe wild card comes from the fact that, okay, they were trying to vote him out multiple times and he could just never get voted out because he kept finding idols as in wild card. But yeah, I would like to know how he's getting this kind of reputation because it seems like he seems so friendly this season and fun and like he's getting these funny confessionals versus the strict, I'm a veteran. That's my thing.
Yeah. So, but the whole thing is part of the reason Boston Rob wanted to vote out Jeremy or Ben is because they're new school as well. And so Danny goes to Ethan and Ben and starts talking about how Rob wants to stay old school strong in front of Ben. And Ethan goes, he's not old school, right? And I wanted to like cry because that was just such a funny thing. Like, how do you? It's like that time when everyone was on the beach, and you remember
when
that
Dean said, "Let's split the vote," but then everyone was there.
Yep.
So yeah, I wonder with this episode, Danny, was she like super paranoid and that led to her downfall, or was she rightfully so paranoid and she was actually being left out? Because it seems like with the edit that Danny blew up her entire game in the matter of this 42-minute episode. Like you're saying, the old school in front of Ben and then targeting your own seemingly old school alliance member. But I don't know, Danny on Instagram, I was seeing on Facebook, someone like screenshotted her replies to like people's Instagrams posts. I think Ethan maybe posted like the clip of Danny saying old school in front of Ben. And then Danny commented something like sort of passive aggressive, really like against everything kind of thing. And then even on other Instagram posts, she was commenting like, oh yeah, don't trust Parvati. She unfollowed Parvati on Instagram. So it seems like there's a lot of drama surrounding this outside of the game, and that if it has translated to people hating each other outside of the game, I feel like there's maybe a lot that we aren't seeing inside of the game that has escalated. And I want to know. It's interesting.
Yeah, especially because we talked about how we hoped that kind of wouldn't happen since like All Stars got kind of ugly and it was not fun because people were taking it outside of the game. So
yeah, and so it makes sense. Like Danny did shoot herself in the foot a little bit with the old school comment and then targeting Parvati and then telling Boston Rob to target Parvati when Boston Rob and Parvati are like super close. Boston Rob did a good job like bluffing and being, okay, yeah, I'll vote her out. You'll be my new number one. It seemed like Danny wanted to take up that girl role in the alliance in taking out Parvati and then going into Parvati's position in the alliance. And I don't know. It's interesting because at Tribal Council, Parvati says, I hope this is the right risk to take, in the fact that the 3 old school voting out Danny, now you are in the minority for the old school versus new school mantra that has been happening. And so you lose a number there. And now the new school definitely have a bigger majority than they did even this week. And so I don't know. I think it is risky, but then you can also say, like, if you keep Danny around, she is a wild card as well. She's already going a little like off the wall in being paranoid. And so maybe you don't want that on your tribe. And then you're just hoping next week you can get the numbers to not be voted out if you're in the minority of old school people now.
Yeah, and I wonder how much the old school versus new school thing is like actually a concern to people. Because I feel like it's more like, oh, we want a new school person to be a winner, but it's like, do you really care if like Danny is the winner? Because it's not like she's representative of like the old school way of thinking or whatever. You could even argue that Boston Rob isn't actually old school because this season he won wasn't an old school season. But that's just me.
Yeah, and so another name that came up was voting out Parvati. It was interesting because even though all of these names did come up at the end of the day, it was an 8-1 vote against Danny. And so everyone did get on the same page, which is fascinating because last week we saw it being split with Michelle and Jeremy on the outside. And it seems like everyone did come together and do an 8-1, which means, next week they can't do another 7-1 split anymore because things sort of have to form, I feel like. But I would agree with what everyone did this episode. I think voting out Parvati right now would be too early because then you piss off Ethan and Boston Rob, and then everyone is probably thinking of a tribe swap that's going to happen, and you don't really want 2 people pissed off at you. And so I agree there. And it's just interesting because next week in the preview, we do see people saying we need to go after the big dogs. But then I guess you can't be afraid forever. Like, you have to piss off people at one point or another. And so I don't know. It's really, really difficult.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of one of those things where even Ethan and Boston Rob have to admit that getting out Parvati eventually has to happen in order for them to move forward. But you don't want to piss off people's allies too early in the game because it's like Boston Rob still has friends on the other tribe. So it's like if you piss off Boston Rob and then you end up on a tribe with like him and Tyson and someone else that he's friends with, that's bad. And I feel like that's one of the things about pissing people off early in the game is there are so many people that are still really well connected on both tribes. So
yeah, so it will be interesting next week if they do take a shot, because you do have a majority new school alliance who could, when Blue loses next week, totally take a shot at Boston Rob, Ethan, or Parvati. And I don't know, though, because I definitely think they probably thought, okay, tribe swap at 18 into either 3 tribes of 6 or new tribes of 9, because that has seemed to be the trend in recent seasons. So didn't happen at 18. They still went to tribal, and then didn't happen this week and not happening next week, which they don't know that, but like you're thinking you're probably going to swap on one of those numbers that can be divided into groups. And so with 17, 16, 15, you've got to be thinking you're swapping at 16 or 15 because those are the next even numbers, because you're probably going to merge at like 13, honestly.
yeah. So another thing that they could do is that thing they sometimes do where they swap into like 3 tribes and then have like a leftover.
Yeah.
And then the leftover joins the losing tribe. So theoretically there could be a swap at any time. So I don't exactly blame them for not constantly, because I feel like you can't constantly be in the mindset of, oh, we're swapping next week, because then like you don't build solid relationships where you are. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think finally we'll talk about Boston Rob and his apparent mist that he has because he got everyone to empty their bags at Tribal Council, which is a feat, but also I think the people in your alliance are probably going to empty their bags. And then if you don't empty your bag, then you look like a sketchball. I think Adam being so vocal about saying, why do we have to do this? Why should we all know who has an idol? Might peeve some people off because then you look sketchy. But I was like, damn, Boston Rob can literally make everyone do anything. And just lucky Denise and Adam that they were sitting on the far other end of all of the little stools, because if they were right next to Boston Rob, you could probably totally tell that she didn't just dump her bag out, but she was doing it slowly.
Adam was also being way too obvious about that when he was like, why should you know who has, like, he was being super sus. I feel like even if you saw Adam's empty bag because he protested so much, you're going to be suspicious of him.
Yeah, I think you just got to go along with it, especially if everyone else is going along with it. If nobody was and everyone was protesting it, then sure, you could be vocal. But when everyone's going along with it, you become the black sheep, and then you're targeted, alienated. You're putting the spotlight on you, and you do not want that.
Yeah, but it turned out okay for everyone. Question mark. I guess we'll have to see how that turns out next week. Like if anyone is still suspicious about the idol being out there, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. And honestly, it could have been to confirm that Ben doesn't have the idol. And maybe next week Ben will go home because everyone thinks he's a wild card.
Yeah. So there's still a lot up in the air. I'm excited for next week. So
yeah. So thank you all so much for watching. We've been talking for an hour. So that is exciting, about a 42-minute episode. So that's great. And let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. You know, this 2 half idols that were found. What do you think of that? And we will see you all next time.
bye.